I'm Samuel, 35, male. I live in a modest three-bedroom house in the suburbs, the kind of place you buy when you think you know what the next 30 years of your life are going to look like. For 15 years, I've worked at Sterling Manufacturing, our family's business, pouring my life into the company my grandfather built and my father expanded. This story is about how the family I dedicated my life to decided I wasn't good enough, and how a forgotten piece of paper became my key to freedom and revenge. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. Growing up, Sterling Manufacturing wasn't just a business, it was the fifth member of our family. It was the silent guest at every dinner table, the topic of conversation on every holiday, and the backdrop to every significant memory I have. My grandfather, a stern but fair man with calloused hands and a mind as sharp as the tools he once used, started it in his garage. He built custom machine parts, and his reputation for quality was everything. My father, Marcus, took over in his late 20s. He had the business acumen grandfather lacked and transformed the small workshop into a regional powerhouse. I was groomed to be the third generation. From the time I could walk, I was at the factory. I spent summers sweeping metal shavings from the floor, then learning the machines and eventually understanding the logistics. I didn't go to an Ivy League school. I went to a state university for a degree in mechanical engineering and business management, a practical education for a practical future. Every choice was made with Sterling in mind. When my friends were backpacking through Europe after graduation, I was on the factory floor learning every single job from the ground up. I wasn't just the owner's son, I was an apprentice, and I had to earn the respect of men who had been working there since before I was born. And I did. I put in the hours, the sweat, and the dedication. I knew the name of every employee, the quirks of every machine, and the history of every major client account. My father always spoke of the future in terms of we. When we expand into the southern states, Samuel, or when you take over, Samuel, you'll need to remember. It was an unspoken promise, a covenant sealed not with ink but with years of shared labor and expectation. I was the heir apparent, the one who understood the soul of the company. I was promoted on merit, moving from the floor to junior management, and for the last 5 years, I'd been the head of operations. I ran the day-to-day. I optimized supply chains, managed production schedules, and handled the complex dance of logistics that kept our clients happy and our profit margins healthy. Under my operational leadership, we'd seen a 20% increase in efficiency and our highest profits on record for 3 consecutive years. I wasn't just filling a seat, I was adding real, quantifiable value. My younger brother, Caleb, was a different story. 8 years my junior, he floated through life on a cloud of my father's indulgence. While I was learning to calibrate a CNC machine, Caleb was at tennis camp. While I was studying for my engineering finals, he was getting a liberal arts degree from a private college my father paid for with a cheerful, "Let the boy find himself." Caleb never worked a summer at the factory. He showed up after graduation, tanned and smiling, and was given a newly created marketing associate role. He was charming, I'll give him that. He could talk his way into or out of anything. He was great at client dinners, laughing and telling stories, but he had no concept of the grit and precision that made those dinners possible. His contributions to the company were negligible. He redesigned the company logo twice at great expense. He launched a social media campaign that resulted in a lot of likes but zero new leads. He was always full of buzzwords like synergy and disruption, but when I tried to pin him down on a practical implementation plan, he'd just wave a hand and say, "That's the operational stuff, Sam, you're the guy for that." My father, Marcus, saw none of this. In his eyes, Caleb was the visionary, the one with the modern perspective the company needed. He saw my practical, hands-on approach as old-fashioned, a remnant of my grandfather's era. He started calling Caleb his secret weapon in board meetings, a phrase that made my stomach turn. The tension had been building for years, a low hum of resentment beneath the surface of our family dynamic. I would present a detailed plan for a multi-million-dollar equipment upgrade, complete with ROI projections and efficiency metrics, and my father would listen politely before turning to Caleb to ask what he felt about the company's brand image. Caleb would offer a vague platitude about staying agile, and my father would nod thoughtfully as if he just heard a piece of profound wisdom. It was maddening. The employees saw it too. The veterans, the ones who had worked with my grandfather, would give me knowing, sympathetic looks. Clara, our head of HR and a woman I deeply respected, once pulled me aside after a particularly frustrating meeting. "You're the heart of this place, Samuel," she said quietly. "Don't ever forget that. The real work gets done because of you." Her words were a small comfort in a rising tide of frustration. I felt like I was holding the entire company on my shoulders while my brother was being praised for decorating the roof. I signed my first real employment contract when I was promoted to head of operations, complete with a strict non-compete clause. At the time, it felt like a formality, a symbol of my commitment. My father had presented it as such. "This just protects us, son," he'd said, clapping me on the shoulder. "It shows you're in this for the long haul. One day this will all be yours and Caleb's to run together." The idea of leaving was so foreign that I barely skimmed the legal text. Why would I ever compete with my own future, my own legacy? Sterling Manufacturing was my birthright, the culmination of my life's work. The thought of it being anything else was simply inconceivable. I was so focused on upholding my end of the promise, on earning my place, that I never stopped to consider that the promise itself might be a lie. The announcement came on a Tuesday morning. It was disguised as a mandatory senior leadership strategy meeting, a common enough occurrence. I walked into the main conference room with my tablet loaded with production reports and third-quarter projections. Marcus was at the head of the table, beaming. Caleb was beside him, looking smug in a suit that was too expensive for the work he actually did. All the department heads were there, Clara from HR, our CFO, our head of sales. The mood was strangely formal. "Thank you all for coming," Marcus began, his voice full of manufactured gravitas. "As you know, Sterling has been on a remarkable trajectory, but to reach the next level we need to be bold, we need to evolve, we need leadership that is prepared for the challenges of tomorrow." I nodded along, assuming this was the preamble to the equipment upgrade I had been pushing for. I had the final proposal in my folder ready to present. I thought finally he was seeing things my way. "To that end," he continued, his eyes sweeping the room before landing with paternal pride on my brother, "I have decided to restructure our executive team. I am thrilled to announce the creation of a new role, Vice President of Strategy. This position will oversee all departmental operations and guide our company's future growth." A chill went down my spine. Oversee all departmental operations. That was my job. I was the head of operations. I looked at Caleb, and the triumphant smirk on his face confirmed my fear. "Please join me in congratulating my son, Caleb, on his promotion to this vital role." The room was silent for a beat too long. It was the kind of silence that's louder than an explosion. Then a smattering of polite, uncertain applause broke out. Our CFO, a man I'd worked with for a decade, wouldn't meet my eyes. Clara looked at me with a pained expression, a silent apology in her gaze. I felt the blood drain from my face. I was numb. It was as if the world had suddenly tilted on its axis. He hadn't just promoted Caleb, he had promoted him to be my boss. My unqualified, inexperienced, younger brother was now my direct manager. I sat there, my hands clenched into fists under the table, my knuckles white. Rage, hot and volcanic, surged through me. Every late night, every missed vacation, every sacrifice I had ever made for this company flashed before my eyes. I had given my life to this place, built on the foundation of a promise, and my own father had just demolished it in front of all my colleagues. He had publicly humiliated me. He had chosen flash over substance, charm over competence. He had chosen his favorite son over his capable one. The rest of the meeting was a blur. Caleb stood up and gave a short, rambling speech filled with corporate jargon he'd probably learned from a podcast. He talked about leveraging synergies and pivoting to a new paradigm. He didn't mention a single concrete idea or plan. He was a child playing dress-up in his father's chair, and everyone in that room knew it. My father looked on, his face glowing with pride, completely oblivious to the insult he had just delivered. When the meeting finally ended, I stood up on shaky legs and walked out without a word. I went to my office, the one with a window overlooking the factory floor I knew so well, and shut the door. I could hear the hum of the machinery, the lifeblood of the company, my lifeblood, and all I could feel was a profound sense of betrayal. It wasn't just about the promotion, it was about the dismissal of my entire life's work. It was the confirmation of a fear I'd long held but never wanted to admit. To my father, I was a functional part of the machine, but Caleb was the heir to the kingdom. I was the worker bee, he was the prince. A few hours later, my father appeared at my door. He had the gall to look cheerful. "Samuel, a big day, eh? A new chapter for Sterling." I just stared at him, my face a mask of stone. "You're quiet," he said, his smile faltering slightly. "I know this is a big change, but I need you to support your brother. He's got the vision and you've got the operational know-how. Together, you'll be unstoppable." "He's going to be my boss," I said, my voice flat and devoid of emotion. "Caleb is going to be my boss." "Titles, Samuel, just titles," he said dismissively. "We're a family, you'll still be running the floor. We just need Caleb to steer the ship. He's a natural leader." A natural leader? Caleb couldn't lead a team out of a paper bag. He'd once spent an entire week trying to figure out our new expense reporting software. The sheer delusion of my father's statement was staggering. "He knows nothing about operations, Dad. He knows nothing about our suppliers, our machinery, or our people. The employees will not respect him. Our clients will not respect him. This is a mistake." My father's face hardened. The cheerful facade dropped, replaced by the stern patriarch I knew all too well. Your job is not to question my decisions. Your job is to do what's best for this company, and what's best is that you get in line and support your brother. He is your superior now. You will report to him and you will give him the respect that his position demands. Am I clear? The word superior hit me like a physical blow. I felt a seething rage building in my chest, so powerful I thought I might actually explode, but I held it in. I looked at my father, the man I had spent my life trying to emulate and impress, and I saw a stranger. He wasn't a business leader making a strategic decision. He was a father playing favorites, and he was willing to risk the company his own father built to indulge his golden child. I gave a single curt nod. Crystal, I said, my voice laced with ice. He left satisfied that he had put me in my place, but he hadn't. He had just shown me where I truly stood, and in that moment the loyalty I had felt for him and for Sterling Manufacturing fractured, perhaps irreparably. I was no longer a son being groomed for his inheritance. I was just an employee, and a deeply undervalued one at that. The days that followed the announcement were a special kind of hell. I was trapped in a nightmare of my own making, forced to go through the motions in a place that no longer felt like home. Caleb, drunk on his new power, was insufferable. He called endless, pointless meetings to ideate and blue sky. He demanded reports on metrics he didn't understand and then criticized them using vague feedback like, "This lacks punch, Sam, make it more dynamic." He would stroll onto the factory floor wearing a pristine suit and offer unsolicited advice to seasoned machinists who had forgotten more about manufacturing than he would ever know. They would listen politely, then look at me with pity in their eyes as soon as he walked away. My father, Marcus, was completely blind to the chaos. He saw Caleb's frantic, unproductive energy as dynamic leadership. He would praise him openly for shaking things up. Meanwhile, I was working 16-hour days, not only doing my own job but also cleaning up the messes Caleb created. He'd make promises to clients we couldn't keep, agree to deadlines that were physically impossible, and purchase flashy, unnecessary software that wasn't compatible with our existing systems. I was the one who had to call the clients and smooth things over, the one who had to sit down with the floor supervisors and figure out how to rejig the entire production schedule, the one who had to explain to the IT department why we just wasted $20,000. I was running a one-man damage control operation, and the stress was eating me alive. The worst part was the condescension. Caleb treated me like I was his personal assistant. He'd interrupt my meetings, dismiss my opinions with a wave of his hand, and talk over me when I was trying to explain complex logistical problems. In one particularly galling instance, we were in a meeting with a major client. I was explaining a potential supply chain issue when Caleb cut me off mid-sentence. "What my brother is trying to say," he said with a smug little smile, "is that we are proactively optimizing our logistics for a more robust end-user experience." The client, a no-nonsense guy who had worked with me for years, just stared at Caleb blankly. I had to bite my tongue so hard I tasted blood. I went home every night feeling defeated, anger. Why and trapped? The non-compete clause I had signed years ago loomed over me like a guillotine. It was a standard, ironclad agreement for senior management. It prevented me from working for any competitor in the same industry within a 500-mile radius for a period of 5 years after my employment ended. In our specialized field, that was a death sentence. It meant I couldn't even work for one of our suppliers or major customers. My father had designed it to keep his key people locked in, and I was the keyest of them all. Leaving meant either changing careers entirely at 35 or moving my family across the country. I felt utterly stuck. One miserable Saturday afternoon, I was in my home office trying to untangle a production schedule Caleb had streamlined into oblivion. My desk was a mess of paperwork. In a fit of frustration, I swept a pile of old files onto the floor. As I bent down to pick them up, my eyes fell on a thick, bound document, Sterling Manufacturing, LLC Corporate Restructuring, Fiscal Year 2022. I barely remembered it. It was from about a year ago. My father had decided to change the company's legal structure from a standard corporation to a limited liability company for tax purposes. He'd held a brief meeting, explained it was just legal housekeeping, and we'd all signed some new paperwork. I had signed it without much thought, trusting it was all standard procedure. Curiosity piqued, I opened the document. It was dense with legal jargon, but I started reading. Deep within the section on employee contracts, I found a clause. It stated that upon the dissolution of Sterling Manufacturing, Inc. and the formation of Sterling Manufacturing, LLC, all existing employment agreements with the former entity would be rendered null and void. New agreements with the LLC were to be issued and signed. A cold, electric thrill shot through me. I remembered signing a new employment offer letter, but it was a simple, one-page document outlining my salary and title under the new LLC. I didn't remember signing a new non-compete agreement. My heart started pounding. I tore through my files, my hands shaking. I found my employee file, the one I'd kept copies of for my own records. There it was, my original contract with Sterling Manufacturing, Inc., signed years ago with its terrifying non-compete clause. And right next to it was the new offer letter from Sterling Manufacturing, LLC. I scanned it, then scanned it again. Salary, title, benefits, but no mention of a non-compete, no addendum, no separate document. It wasn't there. In his haste to push through the restructuring for tax benefits, my father, the great architect of my cage, had made a mistake. He, or his lawyers, had overlooked re-signing the senior managers to new non-compete agreements under the new legal entity. The chains I thought were binding me had rusted away a year ago, and I hadn't even realized it. I leaned back in my chair, a slow smile spreading across my face. The rage and despair that had been my constant companions for weeks began to recede, replaced by a feeling I hadn't felt in a long time: hope. My father's obsession with optimizing his finances had created the very loophole I needed. He had been so focused on the big picture of tax law that he had missed the most crucial detail of all. He had overlooked me. He had taken my loyalty for granted, assuming I would never even think to look for a way out. He assumed I was a permanent fixture, as much a part of the company as the machines on the floor. It was the architect's greatest oversight. He had built a prison but forgot to lock the door, and I was about to walk right out of it. The discovery of the void non-compete clause changed everything. It was like a switch had been flipped in my mind. The despair was gone, replaced by a cold, clear sense of purpose. I wasn't just going to leave, I was going to leave on my own terms, and before I did, I was going to understand exactly what was happening to the company I had poured my life into. My father's decision to promote Caleb wasn't just nepotism, it felt irrational, almost reckless. I needed to know why. My first call was to Elias Vance. He was a retired business consultant who had been a close friend of my grandfather. He'd known the business since its inception and had unofficially mentored me for years. He was sharp, discreet, and had a healthy skepticism of my father's business style. I met him for coffee in a quiet cafe in the next town over. I laid out the whole situation: the promotion, the chaos Caleb was causing, and most importantly, the non-compete loophole. Elias listened patiently, his steepled fingers resting on his chin. When I finished, he took a slow sip of his coffee. "Samuel," he said, his voice grave, "your father is a good salesman, but he's always been an emotional operator. This move with Caleb isn't strategy, it's vanity, but your discovery, that's not just a loophole, that's a highway." Hila aimed forward. However, walking away is one thing, understanding what you're walking away from is another. You said Caleb is spending money recklessly. I nodded. New software we don't need, expensive consultants for his branding initiatives, first-class flights to conferences he gets nothing out of. Follow the money, Elias advised. Marcus may be the CEO, but a company's real story is always written in its financial records. You're head of operations, you have access, be careful, be methodical, don't look for a smoking gun, look for the small leaks that tell you the ship is sinking. I took his advice to heart. The next day I began my quiet investigation. As head of ops, I had high-level access to the company's accounting software and expense reports. I started with Caleb's corporate credit card statements. It was worse than I thought. There were lavish dinners with potential clients who never materialized into actual accounts. There were subscriptions to dozens of expensive mastermind groups and online courses. He'd hired a personal branding coach for $5,000 a month. This was frivolous, but it wasn't the whole story. I started looking at the bigger picture, cross-referencing vendor payments and contracts. That's when I found the first major red flag. Caleb had recently signed a new contract with one of our shipping carriers. The rate was nearly 15% higher than the one I had personally negotiated with a different carrier just 6 months prior. There was no reason for the change. Our old carrier was reliable and cost-effective. Why would he switch to a more expensive option? I did some digging into the new company. It was a smaller, newer firm. The owner's name seemed vaguely familiar. A quick social media search gave me the answer. The owner was a college friend of Caleb's. He was funneling company money to his buddy under the guise of a logistics contract. My next point of contact was Clara, the head of HR. She was one of the few people I trusted implicitly. She had been with the company for 20 years and was fiercely loyal to its employees, if not always to its management. I asked her to meet me for lunch away from the office. I told her I was concerned about the company's direction and the recent leadership changes. I didn't reveal my plan to leave, but I shared my unease. Clara sighed, pushing her salad around her plate. "It's a mess, Samuel. Morale is at an all-time low. The floor supervisors are complaining that Caleb's constant interference is destroying their production schedules. 3 of our best engineers have discreetly asked me about our severance policy. They're updating their resumes. People are scared. They see an inexperienced fool at the helm and a CEO who enables him." Then she lowered her voice. There's something else. A few weeks ago, Marcus had me run a report on the total cost of our senior employee benefits packages, specifically the ones with long-term vesting options. He was asking strange questions about what would happen if several senior people left at once. It felt like he was calculating the cost of a purge. That sent a chill down my spine. Were they planning to push out the experienced, loyal employees, my people, to cut costs and consolidate Caleb's power? The idea was monstrous. It wasn't just about me anymore. This was about the people who had dedicated their careers to Sterling manufacturing. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place late one night in my office. I was digging through the server looking at old financial projections. I stumbled upon a folder I hadn't seen before, one that was password protected, but the password hint was grandfather's first hire. I knew that name. It was the old machinist who had taught me how to use a lathe when I was a teenager. I typed it in and the folder opened. Inside were documents detailing a potential sale of the company. My father had been in talks with a private equity firm for months. The deal was contingent on Sterling showing increased profit margins over the next 2 quarters. Suddenly, it all made sense. The reckless cost-cutting, the talk of a purge, and even Caleb's promotion. My father wasn't thinking about the long-term health of the company. He was dressing it up for a quick sale. He was pumping up the short-term numbers to get a bigger payout. And Caleb was his puppet, the visionary VP who could spin a good story for the buyers, while I, the guy who would have pointed out that these short-term gains were gutting the company's core, was sidelined. He wasn't building a legacy for his sons. He was cashing out. The company, my grandfather's life's work and my own, was nothing more than a number on a balance sheet to him. And he was going to sell it, leaving the loyal employees with nothing but new, ruthless owners. The betrayal was deeper and darker than I could have ever imagined. The knowledge of my father's plan to sell the company settled in my gut like a bee. Lock of ice. Every action he and Caleb had taken over the past few months suddenly snapped into sharp, ugly focus. This wasn't just about nepotism anymore. It was a calculated, cold-blooded betrayal of every single person who worked at Sterling, my grandfather's memory included. My quiet investigation was over. It was time to formulate a plan. My objective was twofold. First, I needed to protect myself and my future. Second, and just as important, I needed to protect the people who had been loyal to me and to the company, the ones my father was preparing to sacrifice for his payday. Revenge was a part of it, yes, but it was a cold, precise form of revenge. I wasn't going to scream and shout. I was going to dismantle my father's plan from the inside out, using the very skills he had always taken for granted. My meticulous planning, my operational knowledge, and my relationships with the people who actually made the company run. My first move was to quietly reach out to our top 2 competitors. Thanks to my void non-compete, I was now the most eligible free agent in the industry. I knew their operations inside and out. I knew their strengths, their weaknesses, and exactly how to beat them. More importantly, I knew Sterling's clients, our pricing structures, and our operational vulnerabilities. I was a walking, talking treasure trove of strategic information. I scheduled discreet meetings with the CEOs of both companies. I didn't go in asking for a job. I went in with a proposal. I presented them with a detailed plan of how, as their new head of operations, I could increase their market share by targeting Sterling's weaknesses, which were currently being exacerbated by incompetent management. I laid out a strategy to poach Sterling's most valuable clients and, crucially, its most talented employees. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Both companies made me offers, but one, a firm called Apex Industries, was particularly aggressive. Their CEO, a woman named Diana, was sharp and saw the opportunity immediately. "Samuel," she said, "this isn't just about hiring you. This is about acquiring an entire operational brain trust. What would it take to bring your key people with you?" This was exactly what I wanted to hear. We began to sketch out a plan. Next, I identified the key personnel at Sterling who were essential to its success and who I knew were loyal to me. There were 5 of them, our top 2 sales executives who managed our biggest accounts, our lead engineer, a genius at product design, our factory floor supervisor who could make the machinery sing, and our head of logistics who knew our supply chain better than anyone. These were the pillars holding the company up. Without them, Sterling wouldn't just falter, it would collapse. I approached each of them individually outside of work. I laid my cards on the table. I told them about my father's plan to sell the company to a private equity firm, a move that would almost certainly result in massive layoffs and a toxic work environment. I told them about Caleb's incompetence and the financial mess he was creating. Then I told them about my offer from Apex. I explained that I had negotiated not just for myself but for them. Apex was prepared to offer all 5 of them positions with a 15% salary increase, better benefits, and a signing bonus. I wasn't asking them to jump from a sinking ship. I was offering them a lifeboat to a better one. There was no hesitation. The frustration with Caleb and the fear for their futures had already primed them. Within a week, all five had secretly accepted their offers from Apex. We had a plan, a coordinated exit strategy. We would all tender our resignations on the same day at the same time. We called it the Exodus. While this was happening, I continued to play the part of the dutiful, if sullen, son and employee. I attended Caleb's pointless meetings, nodded along to his nonsensical ideas, and quietly did my job. But in the background, I was methodically preparing for my departure. I downloaded my client contacts, performance metrics, and project files, all data that I was legally entitled to as it was part of my own work product. I documented every single one of Caleb's disastrous decisions. The overpriced contract with his friend, the useless software purchases, the angry emails from clients about missed deadlines. I created a timeline, a dossier of incompetence, complete with financial data to back it up. The final piece of my plan involved our three largest clients. Combined, they represented nearly 40% of Sterling's annual revenue. I had managed these accounts personally for years and had strong relationships with their key decision makers. In the week leading up to the exodus, I paid each of them a courtesy visit. I didn't tell them I was leaving. Instead, I simply expressed my concerns about the new strategic direction of the company. I spoke about the operational challenges we were facing and the learning curve of the new management. I didn't need to say much. They were smart people. They had already noticed the dip in service and the confused communication since Caleb took over. I was just planting a seed of doubt, letting them know that the reliable, efficient Sterling manufacturing they were used to was a thing of the past. I subtly let them know that my ability to guarantee the level of service they were accustomed to was being undermined. The date was set, a Friday 2 weeks before the end of the quarter, the exact time when my father would be trying to make the company's numbers look as good as possible for the private equity firm. Everything was in place. My team was ready. Our new contracts were signed and waiting. My dossier of Caleb's failures was complete, and my resignation letter was sitting on my desk, a single page that would detonate a decade and a half of my life and bring my father's house of cards crashing down. It was a silent resignation, a quiet coup, and it was going to be devastating. Friday morning arrived with a gray, overcast sky that perfectly matched the mood I was cultivating. I walked into the office at my usual time, coffee in hand, and gave a pleasant nod to the receptionist. On the surface, it was just another day at Sterling Manufacturing, but I knew that by noon the company would be in flames. At precisely 10:00 a.m., the plan went into motion. 6 emails were sent simultaneously. Mine went to my father, Marcus, and to Clara in HR. The other 5 from my key people went to their respective department heads and to HR as well. My letter was short and brutally professional. Marcus, please accept this email as my formal resignation from my position as head of operations at Sterling Manufacturing, LLC, effective immediately. My final day of employment will be today. Thank you for the opportunity. Sincerely, Samuel. I didn't offer a 2-week notice. The situation didn't warrant such courtesies. A company being secretly prepared for a sale by a CEO who had publicly humiliated me and promoted an incompetent fool to run the place had forfeited any right to a smooth transition. I hit send and leaned back in my chair. For about 90 seconds there was silence. Then my office phone began to ring. It was my father's extension. I ignored it. A moment later, my cell phone buzzed. It was him again. I let it go to voicemail. Then came the frantic banging on my locked office door. Samuel, open this door now, Marcus roared, his voice muffled but filled with a mixture of rage and panic. I calmly gathered the personal items from my desk, a photo of my grandfather, a few books, my favorite coffee mug, and placed them in a small box. The banging continued, more insistent now. Samuel, I am not kidding. You open this door or I'll have security break it down. I took a deep breath and unlocked the door, pulling it open. My father stood there, his face a mottled red mask of fury. Caleb was behind him, looking confused and scared like a child who had just realized the grown-ups were fighting. What is the meaning of this? Marcus snarled, waving his phone with my email on the screen. Effective immediately? Are you insane? I've resigned, I said calmly. I found a better opportunity. A better opportunity, he spat. You can't, you have a non-compete. A small, cold smile touched my lips. No, I don't. The non-compete was with Sterling Manufacturing, Inc. That entity was dissolved last year. You never had me sign a new one with the LLC. An unfortunate oversight on your part. The color drained from his face. He looked as if I had just punched him in the stomach. He knew I was right. In that moment, he realized his mistake, the architect's oversight, and he knew he had no leverage. As we were standing there, Clara came rushing down the hall, her face pale. "Marcus," she said, her voice trembling slightly, "we have a problem. A big one. David and Mark in sales just resigned. So did our lead engineer, our floor supervisor, and the head of logistics. They all sent the same email, effective immediately." My father's head snapped from me to her, his eyes wide with disbelief. He looked back at me, the dawning horror spreading across his features. He understood. This wasn't just me leaving. This was a coordinated exodus. This was a mutiny. "You," he whispered, his voice hoarse. "You did this." "I gave them a better option," I said, my voice even. "I offered them a future at a company that values competence and loyalty, something you were about to sell out from under them." Caleb finally found his voice. "Sell the company? What is he talking about, Dad?" he asked, his eyes darting between us. Marcus ignored him, his focus entirely on me. "You are destroying this company, your grandfather's company." "No," I said, my voice rising with a passion I had suppressed for weeks. You did this when you chose nepotism over competence. You did this when you humiliated me in front of my colleagues. You did this when you decided to gut this place and sell it to the highest bidder without a thought for the people who built it." I took a step closer, lowering my voice. "I am just the consequence of your actions." My words hung in the air. Just then my father's assistant ran up. "Marcus, the CEO of Apex Industries is on line 1 for you, and we've just received emails from our 3 biggest clients. They're invoking the 30-day termination clause in their contracts, citing concerns about managerial instability." That was the final blow. My father staggered back, looking utterly broken. The pillars of his company, his most experienced son, his key operational staff, and his largest revenue streams had all cracked and crumbled in the span of 10 minutes. He had been completely outmaneuvered. The private equity deal was dead. Without its top talent and 40% of its revenue, Sterling Manufacturing was no longer an attractive asset. It was a liability. I picked up my box of personal belongings. "Well," I said to the stunned silence, "I believe that concludes my exit interview." I walked past my father, past my brother, and didn't look back. I could feel their eyes on me as I walked down the hallway, past the offices of the people I had worked with for years. I didn't feel triumph or elation. I just felt a quiet, resolute sense of justice. The house my grandfather had built was still standing, but the foundation my father had laid was rotten, and I had just exposed it to the world. The weeks following my departure from Sterling were a whirlwind. My team and I started at Apex Industries the very next Monday. The atmosphere was a breath of fresh air. We were treated not as assets to be managed, but as professionals to be empowered. The CEO, Diana, was true to her word. She gave us the resources and autonomy we needed to execute the strategy I had laid out. Our first order of business was to seamlessly transition Sterling's former top clients. Because I had prepped them, and because their primary contacts in sales were now with me at Apex, the process was remarkably smooth. We offered them better pricing, and more importantly, a guarantee of the stability and operational excellence that Sterling could no longer provide. Within 2 months, we had secured long-term contracts with all 3, permanently shifting nearly half of Sterling's revenue over to Apex. The impact on Sterling was catastrophic. I heard through the industry grapevine that my father was in a state of perpetual crisis. With his top operational and sales talent gone and his largest accounts vanished, production ground to a halt. Orders were missed. Deadlines were blown. The private equity firm formally withdrew their offer, citing material adverse changes to the business. My father was left holding the smoldering ruins of his grand plan. Caleb, predictably, was completely incapable of handling the crisis. He had no idea how to run operations, how to manage a demoralized workforce, or how to negotiate with angry clients and suppliers. I was told he lasted another 6 weeks before he had a complete meltdown in a staff meeting and resigned, claiming the pressure was untenable. He used his severance to go on an extended vacation to find himself again. My father was left completely alone to manage the fallout. About 3 months after I left, I got a call from an unknown number. It was my father. His voice was different, all the bluster and arrogance were gone, replaced by a hollow, tired tone. "Samuel," he said, "we need to talk." We met at a neutral location, a quiet diner halfway between my new office and the hollowed-out shell of his. He looked 10 years older. The weight of his failure was etched into every line on his face. He apologized. It was a rambling, disjointed apology, full of excuses about pressure and wanting to secure the family's future, but it was an apology nonetheless. He admitted that promoting Caleb was a terrible mistake driven by pride. He confessed his plan to sell the company. framing it as a misguided attempt to cash out before the industry changed. "I've lost everything, Samuel," he said, staring into his cold coffee cup. "The company is on the brink of bankruptcy. I've had to lay off half the staff. The bank is threatening to call in our loans." He looked up at me, his eyes pleading. "I want to offer you your job back. Come back, you can name your price. You can be CEO, just help me save it." I listened, and for a moment, a flicker of the old loyalty, the ingrained sense of duty stirred within me. But then I looked at him, and I didn't see the powerful patriarch of my youth. I saw a man who had been willing to sacrifice me, our employees, and our grandfather's legacy for his own selfish gain. He wasn't asking for my help because he was sorry. He was asking because he was desperate. "No," I said, the word simple but firm. "That company, that life, it's not mine anymore. Ray, you made your choice, Dad. You chose Caleb. You chose a quick payday over a lasting legacy. You have to live with that." I stood up from the table. "I wish you the best of luck," I said, and I meant it. I held no more anger, just a sad sense of finality. I walked out of that diner and didn't look back. My path was forward. Over the next year at Apex, we didn't just absorb Sterling's market share, we built upon it. My team, the core group that came with me, thrived in the new environment. We were a well-oiled machine, and our work helped propel Apex to become the undisputed leader in our region. I was eventually promoted to Chief Operating Officer with a stake in the company. Sterling Manufacturing did eventually declare bankruptcy. The assets were sold off for pennies on the dollar to a larger corporation that shuttered the factory for good. It was a sad end to my grandfather's legacy, but it was an end brought about by my father's own choices. Today, I have a life that is truly my own, not one that was assigned to me by birthright. I'm respected for my skills and valued for my contributions. I still love the hum of machinery and the intricate dance of logistics, but now I do it on my own terms. I learned the hardest lesson of my life in that conference room, that loyalty is a two-way street, and a birthright is worthless if the person bestowing it doesn't respect the person receiving it. I didn't set out to destroy my family's company. I set out to save myself. In the end, I built something far better than a legacy I was supposed to inherit. I built a foundation of my own.